Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio. I've got a really interesting a couple and co-authors of a book back with me today. I've had the pleasure of interviewing them before. I've got Professor Philip Richardson and Danielle Papillon Richardson, and they have co-authored with some other contributors a really interesting book about survival with a humorous twist. Funny Not Funny, Humanity's Risk Register. And they quote a George Carlin saying that the planet is fine. It's humanity that's doomed. Danielle and Philip, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining me again.
Thank you very much, Brian, for your kind invitation. We're really eager to talk about our book, but we're looking forward to your questions as well.
So tell me about it. Why did you write this book, and why include humor as an important component of it?
Well, you will remember that, and you've interviewed us about this previously, that we wrote this book, Tough Resiliency, Smart Agility, and published it last year. And in it, we endeavored, as we are lifelong educators and very curious people as well, we in that book address the need for people to adjust their resiliency and improve their agility and their responses for themselves personally, corporately, association wise, and so on. So that led us to reflect on the need for this next book. And the reason we did it is we want to share the learnings that we've taken upon ourselves to make. You know, there's such a fire hose of information today that we're all bombarded with, that it's very, very difficult for anybody, much less the average person, to really understand the risks that humanity faces. And by risk register, you know, you and I are both very experienced project managers. We've developed projects, major projects, internationally as well as in Canada. And we know that one of the very first things that we do when we're planning a development is we compose a risk register. And that risk register contains all of the known problems that we can face, and we identify what they are. We also come up with solutions that we would apply if they do arise, and we assign a probability to their arising. And so, you know, it's the old adage: if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So, what this gives us as a risk register is something that you revisit. It's dynamic. You revisit it frequently to add new risks that may have arisen or new solutions you may have come up with. And so we think that humanity needs that risk register as well. But at the same time, you know, taking a humorous approach makes it more understandable for the average person to adjust to these risks. And so that's what's led to the creation of the book that
Let me let me
we're
let me quote from your promo. I'm not sure if it's in your book, but from your promotion on this. And you say that this is a quote from George Carlin. In his signature style of sharp wit and biting social commentary, George Carlin expressed his disdain for the notion that humans could save the planet. He saw this as an arrogant and self-important belief, pointing out that we struggle to care for ourselves, let alone the world around us. Carlin mocked the idea that we could protect the planet, citing movements to save the trees, save the bees, save the whales, save the snails as example of how far humanity's delusions of grandeur have gone. He argued that the planet itself is not in danger, rather it is humans who are in trouble. According to Carlin, the Earth will survive long after we've caused our own downfall. Really?
Well, that's his opinion, and you know, he's very witty in the way he delivered it, and you know, he's bringing attention to the very problem we're talking about, and that is the challenges that we face.
So
But
you think
we,
that save the trees, save the bees, save the whales, save the snails are what, a waste of time? Or
No, we disagree with what he said, and we're not going to agree with everything, you know, people say. We disagree, and we take a more optimistic view. We think that those are appropriate exercises for us to consider and to pay attention to and to do something about. So it's a call to action more than it is a statement of fact on the part of George Carlin. So again, the opportunity is here for us to absorb the message. And, what we need to do is we need to be honest with ourselves. We have to remember that people like Carl Sagan, who's a famous futurist, said, extinction is the rule, survival is the exception. We want to be the exception, and we more or less have to be if we intend to survive. So,
I guess there's
so we
numerous
we
different
take
species that have actually proven that right.
yeah, and so these are all opinions, and we've attempted to digest them and to reflect them in our book. And I think it's important for us to take a look at the top 12 existential
Let's
threats
let's
that
let's come to that in a second, if you could.
sure.
Tell us, if you could, the name of the book, when it's coming out, how we can get it.
The name of the book is Funny, Not Funny, uh, Humanity's Risk Register. And the book is currently in process. We've not just relied upon ourselves and our own research, but we've invited, for the 12 top risks, we've invited global experts to pull forth on the chapters that we've composed and to participate and contribute to them, so that people will know that it's not just Danielle and Phil who has this opinion, but rather we're reflecting what we think is the current knowledge and hopefully the optimism that we have to be able to address them. The book will be published in early fall in October, and it's actually available for pre-ordering on Amazon now. And basically, we will be providing opportunities for people to look at this and to remember that this is a dynamic book, meaning we're going to produce further editions annually to take account of new risks that arise, just like you and I do when we build a big project.
Well, it is interesting that you've identified 12 existential threats that we face, and you say 8 of them are created by us. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back, and we're going to run through some of these risks, and we're going to ask our two co-authors a little bit about these risks and what we need to do about them. And frankly, when I read through these things, they're not funny. And so therefore, if we can find some humor in how we deal with them, that would be really helpful. But these are not funny. And so therefore, I think it's really interesting that you've laid out 12 different risks, 8, which we've created ourselves. Stay with us, everyone. We'll be back in just 2 minutes.
Okay.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio. I've got Professor Philip Richardson and Daniel Papillon Richardson with us tonight, talking about a book that they've are in the process of finalizing called Funny Not Funny, Humanity's Risk Register. I've had the privilege of interviewing this couple before on tough resilience, and I think that they've put together really quite a scary list of issues. They've defined 12 existential threats that we face, 8 which are caused by us. And I want to read these through and then maybe ask you, Danielle, to address why you felt compelled to write this book. So number 1, artificial intelligence, science, and technology. 2, asteroids, meteors, solar flares. 3, disease. 4, earthquakes. 5, floods and storms. 6, global warming. 7, politics. 8, poverty. 9, philosophy, religion, and spirituality. 10, volcanoes and supervolcanoes. 11, war. And 12, wildfires. It's quite the list.
It is.
Danielle?
It is.
Why'd you write this?
So we together have 14 grandchildren. We have
14 grandchildren.
I know.
My God, is overpopulation another one of these risks? Most people are talking about the declining birth rate. You're talking about something opposite to that.
We're just trying to replace ourselves.
We have a wedding next summer, so hopefully there'll be more grandchildren.
Well, congratulations and good luck.
Thank you. So for us at this point in time, we're looking at the future of our children, grandchildren, and the future of humanity, right? And so right now, currently, we have families that live in Northern Ontario. They are, as of today, as we are speaking, are being affected by wildfires. We have family in Alberta who several years ago were evacuated due to wildfires, for example. And they were evacuated a couple of years ago. They had people come into their home for safety because they, in another location, were evacuated. We have family in Arizona, right, where there's heat, extreme heat and wildfires happening. We have family in Quebec where flooding is a big thing there as well as fires, right? So we're thinking, what's happening? What's going on? How could we help? And so we're looking at the future of the world, right? So we're oversaturated with information right now, a lot of information, right? With all different pieces of of opinions. We have misinformation as well, right? And so we're looking at that. We're feeling scary. We're feeling confused, right? With all this kind of information, we're feeling helpless. And so, as bad as it sounds, there is good in it as well, right? So today I want to focus on AI.
Yeah,
For
AI,
example.
science and technology, you've got as your number one risk. But yet a
That's
lot of people think it's positive, that it's going to be as transformational as either the invention of the internet or even the invention of the printing press. So why have you got it as a big risk?
Absolutely. And so it can be a big risk if there are no guardrails. And I'd like to go more in depth about the guardrails in a minute. But to really understand, and I'm happy that you talked about say the printing press, right? Because that's where really technology started. It started in 1440. That's a long time ago, right? So we have the moving press, right, invented by Johannes Gutenberg. And so there was a lot of excitement about that. Why? Well, because now you could read books, you could do pamphlets, you could communicate, send messages to the people out there, right? So a lot of excitement. But there also was fear. And the fear, especially through the Catholic Church and the governments, right? They were becoming suspicious of what could be told out there. Loss of control. Loss of control at this point is really important, right? So moving forward, 1876 was the telegraph and the telephone, right? It was excitement. Why? Speedy communication, right?
But people were very fearful at the time that the telephone would mean that people would no longer meet and talk and have personal relationships.
Absolutely, you're absolutely correct, right? And that loss of control again is there as well, right? So then in the 1920s, you had the radio. Awesome, right? But there was fear again. Why? Well, because how will it impact the morality of families right into their living room? So loss of control once again on that. In the 60s, so that's where computers started becoming more available, right? Up to the 1990s, early 1990s, right? Where now you could even have a computer at home. And so a lot of excitement about that, right? Happy to have speed, happy to have knowledge, right? But again, the fear, what was the fear about that? Losing jobs as we're fearing today, right? Displacement of jobs, the privacy, the information overload, right? So it's loss of control. 2000, what happened in the years of 2000? Smartphones. Oh, we love our smartphones, don't we? Right? Social media. We love our social media. And so a lot of excitement on that. But on the negative side of the fear of what's happening out there is the addiction to phones. I know people that have addiction to phones. I'm sure we all do, right?
Daniel's
Mis-
talking about me.
I am. Misinformation, right? A lot of misinformation, overload of information, right? Again, loss of control.
So you're talking about guardrails, but I want to know what you're saying, what you're saying, and what you're intending. You think about,
So,
rock music.
so,
Just a second, if I could. So rock music,
sorry.
people talked about, we got to ban bad language and some rock music that was bad. We just last week there was a big controversy in Alberta about banning books in libraries.
Oh,
We've
yeah.
had issues of freedom of Twitter and of the press. So are we talking about and talk about social media and videos? People are concerned about porn and addiction to gambling sites and stuff like this. So are you talking about guardrails that infringe on freedom or what?
No, no, I'm talking about guardrails in regards to creating the behaviors and creating AI itself. Those are the guardrails that I'm talking about, right? People are going, wow, it's going to kill humanity. Robots are going to come. They're going to take over.
Well, just
It's
this past week, they talked about there was news about some AI that refused to turn itself off.
absolutely, absolutely, right? So those are the kinds of guardrails that I'm talking about because we're unfamiliar with them. And so we did a lot of research on that because to me that's scary, or to us that is scary, right? What's happening? And so where is it going? We don't know exactly where it's going, right? Even an interview with Bill Gates was saying we don't know where it's going. It's going to take many more years, maybe 10, for example. It is in its infancy right now. So this is a good time to put into guardrails, rules and regulations, right? So I want to talk about that for a moment. I just
Can I interject with
sure,
one humorous
absolutely.
thing? Because again, that's part of our unique offer. Jerry Seinfeld, a well-known comedian, said we were smart enough to invent AI, dumb enough to need it, and so stupid that we can't figure out if we did the right thing.
Yeah, yeah. So I just want to name a few of the organizations that are working on guardrails. And this is global universal, right? So one of the very first ones is in regards to the financial aspect, right? It was formed by, and I'm just reading my notes to make sure I have it right. It was formed by World of Economics Forum, and it is called AI Governance Alliance, and that is in Davos, Switzerland. Another organization is strictly about governance, right? And they're called Center for the Governance of AI. They're in Oxford, UK, right? And that is to be able to understand and manage the risks and opportunities created by AI, focusing strictly on governance. We have another one which is in Toronto, right? Robotics. And so this is a RAI Institute, right? They're focusing on really the certification alignment with global structure.
Okay, so Danielle, I appreciate your description of some of the challenges that we've had with technological improvements over time, and this argument that we need guardrails. But some people think that actually prohibition, freedom, etc., are negatives, and are jealous of the role of globalist institutions like the WF, IMF, things like that, and so therefore. Are some of the things you're talking about in regards to restricting or providing governance or regulation around this brand new technology risks that we end up controlling? And I come back to people similarly had fears about telephone. People similarly had fears about videos. People similarly had fears about rock music. And so are the fears that you're currently talking about and the desire for overregulation or regulation overblown? And are they akin to censorship and prohibition and banning books?
Can I just add in that area with, sorry to
Please.
interject, Danielle, but This is not a new topic, the idea of guardrails. 50 years ago, a futurist and science fiction author, Isaac Asimov, published his 3 rules of robotics. And very briefly, they are: number 1, a robot may not injure a human being. Number 2, a robot must only obey the orders given to it by human beings, so long as that doesn't conflict with rule number 1. And number 3, a robot must protect its own existence as long as that does not conflict with rules number 1 and 2. So when you look at the content of those rules, you ask yourself, well, is this the greater good that is going to be imposed by guardrails? I think we need to pay attention to what futurists have said about this, because at the end of the day, individual freedoms, if they conflict with the actual survival of the species, need to be addressed by guardrails. But the application of the guardrails, as you're suggesting, Brian, has to take account of the fact that we human beings are independent actors, and we value our freedoms.
So,
So there's
let me
a
challenge
balance.
you. Let me just challenge you for a second, if I could. So, some people think that without the printing press, we would have still had monarchs and the Catholic Church running the world, and that it was really the printing press that allowed people to read the Bible, interpret the Bible themselves. To have Martin Luther, write his what was it, 10 or 13, I can't
Proclamation.
remember,
Yeah.
and distribute that around the world, that created the Protestant Church and a secular society. That it was the printing press that created democracies, and so. The printing press changed things fairly dramatically, and I could go back and, use some other technologies. And so are we similarly concerned today, overly concerned about AI, the way that we were similarly concerned and maybe over concerned about the internet, about the telephone, about the radio, about the printing press?
Well, I would like to add one thing, and again, we've consulted our favorite friend AI to help us with some of our conclusions, and it's more extensively covered in the book. But what is AI? AI refers to the simulation of human intelligence processes, and AI, in our evaluation, has said the following: in the end, I am exactly what you choose me to be. So it's down to us to evolve, our understanding and application of AI. But if we take a positive view of it, I think it is a helpful tool in addressing the challenges we talked about earlier. So we need to get it right, and we need to take account of individual opinions, group opinions, and so on in the process, just as was the case in the introduction of those other technologies. It's not so rigid as when you use the word guardrail, it sounds like you're pronouncing from on high, thou shalt do the following. Well, human beings shall do what they please. So we have to take into account that freedom of expression and freedom of opinion. And I think it's a dynamic equilibrium that we're involved in balancing our way through. This is not a black and white rule. Quite obviously, it's a very fertile ground for opportunities for people to weigh in. Who knows what it is we're going to finally conclude as to what those guardrails may be and their effects, as you say, on the restriction, shall we say, of technology. But in the evolution of the process, we need to consider all of these various opinions. It's a continuing process.
And in the book, do you then lay out, Danielle, what these guardrails are and that what you think should be created?
Yes. And so to put it in one sentence, AI should be good for humanity, right? Really, at the bottom line, AI should be good for humanity with morals and ethically done.
We're going to take a break from some messages and be back with Philip Richardson and Danielle Papillon Richardson in just 2 minutes, talking about 12 existential threats to us, 8 that were created by us, and how in their book that's both humor and humorless, what we need to do about it. Stay with us, everyone. Back in 2 minutes. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. I've got a really interesting couple who are also co-authors of a book called Funny Not Funny, Humanity's Risk Register. And they've talked about a bunch of existential risks that we have, 12 of them, in fact. We've talked about AI, and we might come back to AI because I think that that's one of the ones that people are really interested in. And Danielle particularly is very passionate about, and so we may come back to that. But let's talk just for a couple seconds, if you could elaborate on some of the other ones. Asteroids, meteors, and solar flares. I saw a movie just recently about a meteor coming to Canada, coming to the world, and how, frankly, it became political about whether we should do something about it. And a lot of people didn't believe that the meteor was coming. So, what do you think we need to do on asteroids and meteors and solar flares?
Well, we have to remember that famous expression by Pogo: "We have met the enemy, and he is us." So, trying to agree amongst ourselves as to what to do about these risks and so on is an ongoing process, and as you point out, can be political. But nothing spoils a theory like a fact. So, as an example, imagine if a more populated area, except it happened in Siberia in I think 1907 when the Tunguska asteroid struck Earth, and there was devastation. Thousands of miles of forests were knocked down and so on. You can imagine if that were over Toronto. So the cold reality of it is that we're going to have to, again, be honest with ourselves as to what the effects of such an occurrence might be and decide, gee, we better do something about it. So
this movie almost suggested we needed space-based ballistic missiles that would blow meteors up before they got to the Earth. Is that one of the things that you're looking at and suggesting?
It is. In fact, Chris Hadfield has a famous take on this, and we include it in the book. And he says, what people don't understand is that every day, 100 tons of space debris in the form of meteorites, micrometeorites, and so on strike Earth. Like, it's
100 tons a day?
A day. That's Chris Hadfield. And so what he's pointing out is...
So it's not just meteors, it's our own satellites and stuff that we got to be worried about.
Well, there's that aspect of it, but that's sort of the smaller part. Those are the targets. And so, what he's saying to us is that, look, we've done a very preliminary job of even mapping out where the bigger risks are, like the asteroids and so on. And every now and again, we see on the news, guess what? Next weekend, an asteroid the size of a bus is coming by Earth, and thank God it missed us. So, these are continuing events, and so the idea of intervening in the way that you've suggested, i.e., having a space-based technology, is on the menu. It is something that we have to consider, but when you consider it, you have to actually put your money where your mouth is. You've got to actually resource up whatever that response is going to be, and so that requires those political decisions we talked about earlier.
Chuck.
At the end of the day, honesty is what's most important here. So when you get a guy like Chris Hadfield saying what I just told you, we've got to take account of that.
But is honesty the solution? Because there seems to be so many people that don't believe, even things that scientists and astronauts say is fact. So, your chapter 3 is disease. We've just gone through the pandemic, and clearly, some people believed it was a huge issue. We had to get vaccinated and we had to socially distance. We need to mask up, and other people didn't. And now we've got this measles outbreak where, someone that was prematurely born died. And it seems like there's a whole bunch of people that don't believe in vaccines. And so what do you say in disease, that we all need to listen to the Surgeon General, or the reverse, that we all get to be free in our own thinking and decide whether we want to vaccinate or not?
In the case of disease, because the cooperation of a great proportion of the population is required to interdict it, we need to kind of look at our history a little bit. For example, the polio vaccine that was introduced did a marvelous job of eradicating polio as a threat in the day in the 50s. Similarly, smallpox and other vaccinable diseases were interdicted by science. So we need to refer to our past successes in applying our future opportunities or interdictions. So, again, it's a political process, as you're pointing out, Brian. At the end of the day, if we are going to succeed with any of these initiatives, if they're the right ones to follow, we need to have a great proportion of the population, if not all, agree to it. So it's a process.
It's an issue getting people to agree. One of your chapters is on global warming. We've got people that believe in global warming and people that are climate change deniers. We had a carbon tax on that we taken off because people weren't willing to pay a tax to try to solve global warming. You've got earthquakes, floods and storms, volcanoes, super volcanoes and wildfires as several of your risks. Well, those are sort of happening. But I got to ask you, politics you have as a risk. Many people think that democracy is how we solve all these problems. You've got it down as a risk. Why have you got politics as a risk, as an existential risk? Because we're so polarized today?
Well, let's look at it globally. I mean, politics, has different variations worldwide, and so it isn't simply a matter of agreeing internally to Canada or to North America. It's a matter of agreeing externally as well, including the greater mass of population in the world, and they're ruled by different different governmental systems. So I didn't for a moment suggest that we're minimizing any of these challenges. I'm simply saying we've got to work on them. The way to work on them is starting point. We need to be honest with ourselves. Okay, it's going to be difficult to bring people to agreement on a X, Y, Z. So we need to start to or continue to work in that direction. There's no known outcome to that. It's a risk in itself. We've got to keep investing the time and resources to working on that. I say that the scientific method and the honesty that we treat people with, regardless of political system, is vital to that process. If you're not honest with people, you're not going to get their agreement. It's pure and simple. But we understand that. So
I think the issue in politics today is that we are so polarized, and that there's one group of people that believe in globalization and a globalist kind of scenario, and believe that frankly some of the organizations that Danielle was talking about a couple of minutes ago actually would be positive for society. And then there's another group that are very insular and xenophobic and a nationalist, and don't believe any of that, and want to completely live in a very isolationist environment. I got to ask you, one of the other risks you've got, if I could, is philosophy, religion, and spirituality. I would have thought that's a positive. Why have you got it as a risk?
Well, you interviewed me not long ago, and prior to the American elections, on is Trumpism a cult? And you know what I was hoping to be able to convey was the fact that cultism and religion have their origins in tribalism. I mean, many of the world's religions, let's take Islam, for example, beginning with a few hundred Bedouins in the Saharan desert, 1,500 years ago, it's now grown to 1.5 billion adherents worldwide. So, the belief systems that people evolve under the general term of religion are very relevant vectors in what we're trying to do to bring together a common view on what to do. I like Gandhi's famous quote, and it was, "God has no religion." In other words, the destination to which people are aiming is reached by different means. But that doesn't mean that we can't find a way to agree the solutions. Look at the late Pope and the efforts that he made towards reconciliation or reconciling belief systems, between Judeo history, Christian history, and Islamic history, the Abraham Accords. So it's a very complex process. But you know something? The AI that we were talking about earlier is something that is a valuable tool for us in being able to achieve that. Ask AI its opinion on how we might achieve, that kind of unanimity. That's what we need to do. It's a continuous process.
So Danielle, let's end on that if we could. Can I come back to you and ask you? You mentioned some of these organizations that you think we need to have or are working on the guardrails and governance of AI. As you've thought about this and you've looked into it and you've written about it, is AI a risk or is it a benefit to our society?
I believe at the end of the day that AI is absolutely fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. It will benefit us, and it has started to benefit us. And so I see it as an extreme positive. However, I see it as well as because it's just a newborn, right? It, we have to make sure that AI is used for the good of humanity. And that's where we are right now. And so by providing some ethics and some guardrails, I hate to use the word again, guardrails, but rules and regulations of keeping us safe as human beings, right? That it is absolutely fantastic.
So our new
Absolutely.
Prime Minister, Mark Carney, has actually appointed a Secretary of State responsible for AI,
I'm so excited about that.
which is wild. If you sat down with that individual for a meeting, what would you tell him? What would be your advice?
I would, again, going back to guardrails, right? The foundation, because right now it's like a baby, right? What foundations are we working on to make sure that we're taking the right path towards the growth of AI?
One of the issues about AI, though, is, Canada, it's like climate change, I guess, maybe, whatever Canada does sort of is irrelevant if the whole world doesn't do it. So isn't this
It
something
has
that
to, you're absolutely right. It has to be global, it has to be international. It has to be where it includes some of the examples I gave you was in North America, but actually China as well is involved in it, which made me feel so much safer, right? United Nations, there's a proposal going through in United Nations in regards to the rules, the guardrails of AI, and Canada's part of it, right? So from a global point of view, if we get the masterminds together, which they're working on, right, to be able to give us a foundation of what we can work with.
the
I'd
two
like
of
to
you are
add
fascinating? That you've written 2 books now, I understand.
5.
But
This
they're
is our
Brian,
fifth. This is our
So
fifth book.
5 books. I've only talked to you about 2, I guess. Gosh, the dinner table at your house must be fascinating. I hope I get invited to dinner at your house sometime because hearing the two of you interact on all these different topics, 12 different risks, 5 different books, must be amazing. Thank you so much for joining.
it is.
Really
It is.
appreciate
Coffee
it.
Very
time's
kind.
great.
May I just leave us with one quote from Stephen Hawking again? Success in creating AI would be the biggest event in human history. Unfortunately, it might also be the last, unless we learn how to avoid the risks.
Profound statement. We're going to take a break and come back with some concluding comments in just 2 minutes. Philip Richardson and Danielle Papillon Richardson, thank you so much for joining us. Remind us the name of the book.
The name of the book is Funny, Not Funny: Humanity's Risk Register.
Crombie Radio Hour. That was fascinating discussion, Danielle and Phil, about AI. One of the other risks that you talk about is meteors and asteroids. Really? Seriously? Meteors and asteroids?
Well, it's a fact of life, and it's something that humanity has had to live with ever since we began. That's a few million years. And there's quite a lot of activity on that front, and we've all sort of have heard all the dramatic stories about how we might be struck by an asteroid and devastated as a result. And as usual, in each of our segments, I've begun with a humorous quote, and my quote is. There's an asteroid on the way to hit Earth, and it's the size of Texas. That's a comedian, Drew Lynch, who's an American comedian. And at least there's a sort of a humorous side to it. But the not so humorous side is summed up by Chris Hadfield, and our Canadian astronaut. And he said, we get hit by 100 tons of meteorites per day. That's per day.
Per day. That's incredible.
It is. They're primarily absorbed by the atmosphere, of course. And you really have to hand it to the bravery of astronauts like Chris Hadfield, who goes outside of the atmosphere on the ISS, so that they're exposed to these same micrometeors and so on, and have successfully avoided being struck by them, but they take a lot of preventive measures to do so. So, it's a serious subject, and one that we believe is truly existential for
That's interesting. I,
humanity.
I didn't I didn't think about that before. So, the vast majority, if not all of the meteors that come to Earth get burnt up in the atmosphere as they enter the atmosphere. What you're saying is that when the astronauts are in space outside of the Earth's atmosphere, they're at risk of being hit by that. And you said they take preventive measures. What are those preventive measures they could take?
Well, largely it has to do with the tracking that NASA does of objects that are potentially dangerous. And so they steer the ISS to avoid them. And so that's probably avoidance is principally the way they go about surviving. But, in addition to all of those risks, they have cosmic rays and everything else to face. I mean, we really don't appreciate the bravery of these people.
So, what do you think Earth needs to do, if anything, to protect itself against asteroids and meteors in the future?
Well, there's three schools of thought. Do nothing. I don't think that's an option when we actually are presented with what the potential effects are. The other is to come up with solutions and implement them. And third is not very appealing at the moment, and that is to leave Earth, as Elon Musk would like us to do, is to colonize Mars. So, I'd like to start with a sort of a personal story. I'll be brief. When I was a very curious young teenager, I lived in Europe. And one event I recall, my parents and I went all over the place. And one night I was in Switzerland in the Alps. And I laid on top of the hood of my dad's car looking at the Milky Way. And I was so enthralled by it. It inspired me to consider becoming an astrophysicist. Well, as you know, even though I joined the Royal Astronomical Society and did a variety of things, I got distracted by the real world. Mainly, I had to make a living, so I became a business person and a property developer. But that experience has always stayed with me, and it's fascinating and scary when you think about the potential for damage to not just we as individuals, but as a species. It's something that we really need to address. So there are a couple of examples that have happened in recent history, although there are many in prehistorical times that we had to endure where the Earth was struck by asteroids. Most famously, the one that eliminated all the dinosaurs 65 million years ago. But actually, not so long ago, in 1908, the Earth was struck by another asteroid. Now, happily, it was in an area of Siberia that was very underpopulated, but it had such an incredible effect. It was the equivalent of a number of Hiroshima level nuclear weapons going off at the same time. 80 million trees were lost as a result over an area of about 2,000 square kilometers. The size of that asteroid was 50 to 60 meters in size, size of a fair-sized football field, and it detonated over in the atmosphere about 10 kilometers above the surface of the Earth. So there's no crater, but the effects were visible, and it's a good example of what could happen. Just imagine if that had struck Toronto or New York City. It would have obliterated it and killed millions of people. So there's a very recent example of a call to action for us to consider what we need to do to attempt to avoid that outcome for us.
So, I've only got a minute left. What do we do?
Well, Neil deGrasse Tyson came up with a list of solutions. And interestingly, the connection to AI is AI can be a great tool by which we can succeed with these. The first recommendation is to improve our technology to observe and track more asteroids. And that's in process. NASA has a project to do that. Another is to improve realistic interventions. And next is to test those interventions. Then, what we need to do, some of the suggested solutions are develop self-sustaining deep shelters in the earth. And these are all within our grasp, our ability to do. And it just means that we need to impress more people with the necessity of doing so. And believe me, I've seen enough examples that I know that it's a real need, as does Danielle, for us to
Danielle, last word to you. This book sounds fascinating. What's the name of it, and when does it come out, and when can we get it?
It is, you can order it on Amazon. It's a pre-order, and it'll be available in the fall. It is called Funny Not So Funny, and Risk Registers. So it's yeah.
12 different existential risks that we're facing. This has been a fascinating conversation. Danielle Papillon, Phil Richardson, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks kindly.
Much. Have a great
That's our
day.
show for tonight, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I remind you, I'm on every Monday through Friday at 6 o'clock on 960 AM. You can stream me online. Probably not from an asteroid outside of space. They don't have the internet yet, but I wouldn't put it above Danielle and Phil to figure out a way to put the internet on an asteroid in space. But you can stream me from anywhere else at www.saga960am.ca. Good night, everybody. Thanks, Phil and Danielle. I really appreciate it.
Good evening.